So if you ever read a book about photography, you would have heard about lighting patterns. And most commonly, there are 5 lighting patterns. People have been popularizing this for many, many years. I actually believe there are a lot more. And if you really break it down, there are countless. I'm going to show you many of those right now. More important, guys, than understanding, well, this is called Rembrandt lighting, or this is called short lighting, or whatever it may be. Guys, I don't really care much about the naming of it all. I care more about the feeling and what it does for the subject and what we're trying to actually say about that subject. I think it's important to maybe mention, but remember, more important than the words is what it does. So let's first talk about loop lighting. Okay, what is loop lighting? You've probably heard of this thing. What's loop? What loop are we talking about? Well, we're going to call this loop, open loop, and I'll discuss that in a moment. And that refers to the loop type shadow to the side of the nose which does not touch the shadow of the cheek, and it's usually considered front on. And what does this do for us? It adds depth, dimension and shape among many things. So let me show you what that loop is. That loop is right here. Okay, so we've got the light coming from about 45-degree angle. You can actually see the catch lights in her eyes up on an angle like this. And we basically have a shadow of the nose. Now, you see how the shadow of the nose does not actually touch that shadow of the cheek. Therefore, it's an open loop. Okay, so we call loop is usually front on, and it's an open loop. Again, think about what this more does for the face than what we're trying to do, rather than the naming of it all. Do whatever you need to do to remember it, but ultimately, you just have to know what it does. Let's show you some more examples of that. So you see that loop shadow right here? There's a shadow, a loop shadow right over this way. And as you can see, that the lighting is in a bit of an angle, or her body in proportion to the light, is where that both eye sockets are completely lit. So what I would have done is I would have turned her face this way and then turned her face towards the light until a complete eye socket is lit. And then, of course, we naturally get a shadow. Now, depending, guys, on the actual person's face, and it could be ethnicity or anything like that, you could have a longer nose, shorter nose, wider nose, whatever it may be. That shadow is going to increase in size or length or depth, depending, again, on that face or ethnicity and so on. Let's show you some other examples here. Again, we've got that loop shadow. It does not touch the shadow of the cheek. It's front on. It's called open loop. And remember, this is going to be a very, very flattering way of shooting someone. We've got beautiful highlight, we've got beautiful shadow, we've got beautiful shape, and that works really, really well. So let's now talk about short lighting. Short lighting, often people refer to it as loop lighting, and it's sort of similar to, it's basically the same thing, but it's more referred to shooting on a bit of an angle. So shooting on the shadow side of the face, same as open loop, but the face is turned towards the light and not the camera. This is very, very common. This is in fact my favorite quality of light, or my favorite lighting pattern that you'll see me do over and over again. It's most common, it's very flattering. There's obviously depth and there's dimension, it slims the face. That's why I love it. Let's show you my favorite bride that I've ever photographed, and that is my gorgeous wife, Melissa. So she's turning her face towards the light. I'm not shooting on a front perspective, which we called sort of loop. In this now, we actually have got the loop still, but we're shooting on a bit of an angle, and that's been popularized over the last several decades as short lighting. You may have heard that. Same with the guy. We've got that loop shadow, but we are shooting on a bit of an angle. It doesn't touch the actual cheek, that particular shadow of the nose there as well. This is my nephew, Zane, and it works really well. Be careful too that you don't raise the angle of the light too high, that shadow of the nose touches that, the lips, because then you make the nose look very, very pronounced. The lips don't look quite distinguished and it looks a little bit weird. But remember, try to at least illuminate the eye or not. Either have it completely lit or not. Sometimes, especially for the male form, you can have half shadows underneath the eyes and it looks quite good. For a woman, not so great. And again, it depends on what you're trying to say about the subject and what mood you're trying to create. So let's go to this girl. Again, we're shooting on the shadow side of the face. We call that the short side, the narrow side, the sexy side. We do have that loop shadow, which means the light's coming from this direction. And it's very flattering, and it's, like I said, it's very, very common. This one, of course, we've got the light source is very close to the subject. It's quite intense, as you would see, and the highlight and shadow transition is quite great. But again, we're shooting on the shadow side of the face. That shadow does not actually touch the shadow of his cheek, and it's a very, very common way of photographing. So remember, short lighting, it will save you a lot when you're photographing. Now, let's talk about broad lighting. So broad lighting, basically, you would arguably say is pretty much the same as short lighting. All we're doing now is we're just leaving the subject there, but we're shooting on the other side. So basically, it's the face turned away from the light, shooting on the light side of the face. Now, this can widen the face. We've got less detail, and it's usually better for the male face, the male form. So you can see now what I'm talking about. If I shot her on the shadow side of the face, on this side, that would be short lighting. If I'm shooting her on this side, it's broad. Now, she has a very, very narrow face. She's very skinny. Broad lighting can make someone look arguably bigger, but because she's got a very skinny face, it actually works for her. So it works really well. In fact, in this photograph, we see two ways of shooting. We've got the broad side. We're shooting her on the broad side, the light side of her face, and we're shooting the groom on the short side. So now she's actually, they're both very slim, but we actually make him look a little bit slimmer and her looking a little bit broader. But because she's got such a slim face and beautiful cheekbones and jawline, then life is good, no problem whatsoever. What about when we're photographing, let's say, a mature age face, and then we're photographing someone a little bit slimmer? So let's look at the same bride now. Now, I directed a few shots before it, but this is a beautiful moment where the groom's or the bride's father just wiping some tears and mum's soaking in that moment. But you see how we've got mum turning her face towards the light. So we're shooting her on the short side, and then transition from light to shadow is not so abrupt. So it's a softer, quite flattering light, and it's a big light source, being a big window. And she just naturally turned her face towards her mother, which makes it, basically we're shooting on the broad side. Now, again, short side, broad side, what does all this mean? Remember, just know that what is actually doing for the person that you're photographing. It can make a slimmer face look a bit bigger and broader. It can make it look a little bit softer depending on what you're doing. It all depends on the look that you're trying to go for. So again, let's look at the difference. We're looking at the short side here. We are talking about broad. The short side on this side, but then when I simply just turn around and shoot him on the broad side, it looks very different. I actually prefer him on the broad side. I think a lot of guys actually look better on the broad side. I just think it's a masculine thing. It's sort of hard to explain. It just works. Like, yes, this narrows his face. Yes, it gives him a more defined shape and a slimmer face, but if I shoot him on the light side, then now it's quite broad, but it somehow works for his face. So it's not like you can simply go and photograph lighting pattern 23 with bride number 47, because that might just not work for them. So you can't be so premeditated with your lighting that it just never changes, because that's just not right. It needs to be what would suit this person with this quality of light, this intensity of light, with this subject, and what am I trying to say? That's very, very important. You may have heard about Rembrandt lighting. And Rembrandt lighting, of course, is lighting that's been popularized by Rembrandt, because often that he would use window light that was very small and quite up high, and the lighting was quite dramatic. And in which ways is Rembrandt lighting different to short lighting or loop lighting? Well, here's the difference. So we're calling it's basically another way of calling Rembrandt lighting is closed loop. The triangle of light in the face, when one eye or both eyes are in shadow. Basically when the shadow of the loop of the nose, let's start again. The shadow of the nose touches the shadow on the cheek and it joins to cause a little triangular piece of light on that face. And what is this for? It's dramatic, it's moody, it slims the face, it's depth, it gives us dimension, it's very masculine. So you can see now where that shadow of the nose meets that cheek. And again, usually it's whether one eye or both eyes are in shadow. I think people mistake Rembrandt lighting for short lighting. That's not the way it is. And again, same guy, different clothing here, but we've got that triangular piece of light on the face. And it doesn't always have to be a window. This could be sunlight, for example. So we're looking, this is a couple here. She's tilting her face and chin is up. The sun's coming down and we've got the shadow of the nose joining that cheek there as well. And again, guys, more important than, well, I'm going to do Rembrandt lighting today. You just need to know that it's going to be strong. It's going to be very dramatic. It's going to be very moody. It's going to be very masculine. That's what you need to know. Yes, how to do it. And how do you do it? All this lighting, and I'm explaining this two-dimensionally, as in I'm there on you. You're watching me on a screen right now, and I'm not even doing this with models, but all you'd have to do is hold a light source to this subject and move the light around until you get the desired effect. So if you don't really know about lighting and thinking, well, where do I begin? It's simply, well, what will make someone look more flattering? What's less descriptive? What's going to be more dramatic? And once you start looking at these lighting patterns, then you will match the mood that you're trying to convey with the particular person, and then you move the light accordingly. As you can see the shadows, the sun is way above here. I had to give her a pose that would tilt and her chin would be up so that I can get that quality of light on there as well. This again, this is a bit more subtle, but you do see that little highlight on his face, and also the triangle, that little loop shadow of his nose is joining the actual shadow of the cheek there as well. This one here, we've got the light directly above her. This is basically a very small light source. It is coming right down. I need to give her an excuse to get that light on her face, so I tilt her face and chin up, but the light is directly above her. But again, the shadow of the nose meets that cheek. And you sort of see that I'm actually showing you a lot of girls with Rembrandt lighting. I said it was very masculine. I'm not saying to you that you can never do Rembrandt lighting on a girl. No, I'm saying, well, it's just usually a bit more masculine. So in other words, if, let's say, for example, you are photographing someone maybe with a female with masculine features, and then you use masculine quality of light, then perhaps you're going to make that face look less attractive, as in less feminine. Does that make sense? So we have to actually be careful of that. This one here, again, we've got broadside for him, but then we've got that Rembrandt lighting on her face, still using the sunlight. So remember, Rembrandt lighting will be amazing if you want to create mood and drama. And if you want to learn from the best, learn from the man himself. Google Rembrandt, go to an art gallery, have a look around and have a look at the mood that is created with one light source, way better than we will ever do in photography with beautiful paint on a canvas. Let's now talk about flat lighting. Light from the front with little to no shadow. It's less descriptive, but it's also very flattering. So what am I trying to say? I'm saying the light is flooding the person. We're basically flooding the person right from the front. And yes, there's a bit of shadow here and there, but that's because this is being cut away from other things in this particular environment. This was my open garage, and I'm actually illuminating her from the front, and it's very soft, it's beautiful, it's flattering. When I say less descriptive, I'm not saying, well, yes, I can see her eyebrows, her eyes, and her nose, and her lips, and things like that. I can see all those things. But ultimately, I see less detail in the skin. So this might be a great way to photograph maybe parents or grandparents or anyone with maybe some challenging skin or acne or anything like that. Could be just some, happy lines, when you smile and all those lines that you have, and people call them crow's feet. I'm like, that's not really a nice way of saying it. Just call them happy lines or whatever. This girl here, we've got beautiful light flooding her from the front, and it's less descriptive. Her skin is already quite beautiful, but we're actually making it sort of less obvious. If I brought the light from here and I create texture, let's say she had one pimple. Now, I often think of lighting or a face like the Grand Canyon, okay? Peaks and valleys. So, in other words, where you've got those smiling lines, where you've got creases on your face and things like that, where you've got all those different things, that's like a mountainous range. If you're shooting or photographing, let's say, the mountain from above or light from above, as we've discussed that lighting is like water, we're filling in all those nooks and crannies, as we say in Australia, all those peaks and valleys. It's all even, it's flat. Now, the minute we have one little peak and we have light coming from the side or water coming from the side, then now we get a shadow of that pimple or that blemish on the skin. That's going to be a problem. So remember, light is like water, and if you want less description, light from the front. If you want more description, light coming from the side, because that will increase texture, depth, dimension, and form. This the same thing, light's very, very much bouncing in front of her. Yes, there's light from behind her, but there's the light's right in front. It's very flat, and it's very flattering. Same with this girl. This was shot with a 1.4 lens, 105, and it's flooding her. It looks beautiful. It's soft, and it's very glamorous. Same thing here. This is just opening up the garage door and allowing light to filter through, and it's just very front on. If I want to create more shadow on different parts of her body, although the light's coming from this way, remember, light travels in straight lines, and it's just sort of basically flooding her from the front. If I decide to actually put maybe a black card or a gobo or a flag, whatever it is that you want to call it, but basically a piece of black card on either side, I'm cutting away light, which even though that the light's coming from the actual front, giving us flattering light, that these shadows on the side of her body are actually created by cutting away that light on either side. This one here, light flooding her completely in the front. We're filling up all the crevices, so to speak, and bang, it's basically all there. And same with this girl. So remember, if you're photographing someone that's maybe aging skin, challenging skin, or simply you just want to make someone look pretty, flat lighting will be the way to go. Let's now talk about what's been popularised over the years, what we call paramount lighting or butterfly lighting, and that has been popularised over the years because this was often used for Hollywood stars back in the bygone era, where you'd have these Hollywood beautiful stars, and one light would be from a constant, continuous light from the top, and would illuminate her, and we'd get a bit of a shadow underneath the nose that someone said that looked like a butterfly, and it just stuck. I personally don't think it looks like a butterfly. I'll let you be the judge in the next photograph. But it's one light from above, very much usually centered to the subject, emphasizes cheekbones and jawline. It's flattering, it's very glamorous. So this particular photograph, as you can see, we've got the light directly above and in the center, and it's creating a shadow of her, shadow underneath her nose. Be careful that that shadow on the nose does not cross the lip, otherwise it reduces the size of the lips and that illusion, and it is quite distracting. So make sure there's a gap between the shadow of the nose and the upper lip. So that's supposed to look like a pterodactyl. I think it looks sort of like a hawk flying, but perhaps hawk lighting didn't stick because it didn't sound as pretty. This one here, we've got the shadow underneath the nose and lighting up above. Now, I've deliberately actually kept her eyes in shadow because I wanted to make her look a little bit sexy but sinister. So I don't have that catch lights in the eyes with this respect. So again, lighting is all about what you're basically trying to say. This is probably more in tune with what we talked about with Hollywood lighting or paramount lighting, butterfly lighting. Light from up above. This was an actual video light, and we've got that bit of a shadow underneath the nose there as well. And it's very glamorous, it's very pretty. But this can be done in the sunlight as well. Again, we've got that similar shadow, and of course that shadow underneath the nose will be different based upon the length, the size, the width, the depth of the nose. The shadow will be a little bit different depending on who you're photographing. So if you want something typically glamorous and beautiful and all that kind of stuff, then this is going to be a good choice for you. So let's talk about split front, because you may be thinking, well, Jerry, I think you've covered all the lighting patterns that I've read and seen and heard before, but is there another way? Well, split lighting is one of those lighting patterns that's been popularised, but I'm going to show you some variations to all of these in a moment. Excuse me. So split front, what does that mean? Well, basically we're illuminating only one side of the face. It's dramatic and it's moody and it's considered very masculine. So in this respect, we are shooting the bride on the light side of the face, but in this case with the guy, with the groom, we are shooting him on one side of the face, and his other side, which of course is being covered by the bride's face as well, and the veil, is not lit. That's considered split lighting. Now let's ignore the edge light here, the rim light that's on his face, but the main light's coming from one side, giving him a shadow on this basically side. It is very masculine. It is a very cool way of shooting. Now, I want to talk to you about now the difference between, say, pretty light and not so pretty light, and liken it to being sweet and sour. Let me explain. Like a dish, you've got sweet and sour. If you have too much sweet, it's just too much. If you like, or it's too rich. You need something, for example, if you have something very, very rich, you might need something acidic to just break up the richness of a particular part of a dish. So this analogy, guys, is more, and this is not meant to, I'm taking the emotion away and my feeling that I believe everyone is beautiful in their own way. So please don't judge me for what I'm about to basically say, and that is this. If you have, let's say, let's consider an attractive face, as in, you know, what society deems as attractive and pretty and symmetrical and all that kind of stuff. So if you have, let's say, a pretty face over here, and then you have, let's say, pretty light, well, great, we're bringing out the best in that person, pretty light, pretty face, pretty light, pretty, great. If you have, say, a challenging face, challenging features, let's consider the analogy of a sweet face to a sour face, as in sweet is pretty, say feminine, let's say, and then sour is masculine. So if you, let's say, for example, you had a girl with a masculine, say, face, you know, and features, you would say that that would be sour. So let's say there's sour here. Then if we have masculine light, sour light with a sour face, too much. So we need to basically counteract that a little bit, the same way with cooking. So I'm not saying that a girl can't get away with split lighting because Jerry said in A Course in a Bundle that this was basically considered a bit more masculine. No. If you have a pretty face, so in this case, my beautiful wife, Melissa, she's got split lighting. It's considered more masculine, but you would say that she gets away with it. It actually really looks good with her. So it just depends on what you're trying to say. This girl has a pretty face and it's split lit, but she looks amazing in it still. So again, it all depends on what you're trying to say. But going back to it, guys, that this kind of lighting will usually suit the masculine face, the masculine form, and it's considered quite dramatic. So again, don't go out there, I want to photograph split lighting today. No, you should basically say, you know what, I want to create some really beautiful, dark, moody, dramatic pictures of this guy because that's what, he just reeks that. Great. What do? We just put the light on one side of the face. It does not illuminate the other side. And again, depending on different faces and shapes of nose and things like that, sometimes the light has to come a little bit further back to not have a shadow on the other side of the face because some people's noses are a bit bigger and smaller and flatter and things like that, the nature of who we are. Again, this girl, split lighting, one side lit, the other side not. Pretty face, sour light, masculine light, she gets away with it. And sometimes you can do split lighting, and of course, and depending on the person's face, you might get a little tickle of light on the eye, depending on the bridge of the nose. And that can be really cool too, when hardly any light or little or no light is touching on this side, and a little tickle of light is actually illuminating there as well. So really, really cool thing to understand the difference between these lighting patterns. Let's talk about split short. So this is where we start to get a little bit tricky. As in, I do believe there's a lot more than the 5 lighting patterns that have been popularized over the last several decades, because I believe that the lighting patterns, and I'll be honest, I'm not too sure who popularized these names and these sayings, but it was no different to the Jerry Gionis of decades ago, and also no different to the artists who didn't even have to coin that kind of lighting. Like Rembrandt didn't say, well, today I'm going to do Rembrandt lighting. Well, I'm Rembrandt, I'm painting, that's going to be a Rembrandt lighting, it's painting, like that's what it is. Rembrandt would do lighting based upon what he wanted to say about the subject. If he wanted dark, dramatic, moody, or shooting in the basement of a house with the window light being tall, that was just circumstantial. The lighting was already there, and that's the nature of the light, and that's what we did. And then you'll get someone like Renoir, who paints above ground, so to speak, or in the open air, and things are a bit light and fluffy. It depends on what you're trying to say about the person, about who you are, what you're trying to say about the event, whatever it may be. I'm going to get a bit more deeper now with these lighting patterns and start to separate them a little bit. Let me explain. Here we've got split short. We're illuminating only one side of the face. but I'm shooting on the short side. So not only am I using one light on one side of the face, I'm actually biased now to the shadow side. So let me explain this. So you see, rather than looking straight into the camera, we're illuminating her on the other side, but I'm shooting her on the shadow side. Therefore, we have an extra lighting pattern. Let's ignore the rim on his jawline on the back of his shoulder there, his neck. I'm actually got the light on one side and not the other, but I'm shooting him on the shadow side of the face. Same here. Same here. Ignore the edge light. We'll talk about that shortly. So it can actually be really cool, very dramatic. It's got a very cool vibe about this quality of light. See, again, in this case, we've got lighting on one side. We've got some residual light in the front there as well. You can see, of course, some detail there. But it can be very, very cool. And of course, this girl, again, let's call it sweet face, very pretty light, but, sweet face, masculine, sour light per se, but she gets away with it, again, depending on the person. That's the thing, is that when you're photographing a wedding, guys, you normally want to flatter someone. Now, you could be walking on the streets of Colombia or where it may be, or India, and you want to get wrinkles in the face and you want to get the texture and all that kind of stuff. Well, for a bride, she might not want that. She might not want all that character. She might want to look really pretty, but also see character, so you've got to combine these different looks and based upon who you're photographing. Let's now talk about split broad. So what we're basically doing now is we're illuminating one side of the face with light, but we are shooting on the light side of the face. So dramatic, moody, it's also very masculine. So if we look at this, we've got the groom sort of biased to camera right, or his left, and we're shooting him on the other side. Again, he's one side of the face, but I'm shooting him more on this broad side. Now you might say, well, what game plan do you have when you're photographing? What do you do? Where do you even start? Well, sometimes I will look at a face and my first instinct is to normally do short lighting, as in, let me turn the face into the light, let me shoot on the shadow side of the face, and then now I've got that shadow of the nose, the loop shadow, not touching the shadow of the cheek, and that's maybe a good foundation place to start. Well, what I sometimes do, if I have just one light there, I'll just get them to just bring their chin up, look at them directly right in the face and say, all right, let's just turn this way, turn. So sometimes it's more instinct. Like your gut's telling you that, you know, your mind is telling you, well, I will just do short lighting on this person. Or this person has a wide face, therefore I should just shoot slim. I should shoot on the short side. But then I'm like, well, wait a second. If I just get him to turn a little bit, now, I've reduced the size of his face because we've got a shadow on the other side, but I've broadly lit him. Arguably, if I illuminated him with short lighting and shot from this perspective, arguably his face will be widened. So it's almost like an oxymoron. You've got to work out whose face will work with what kind of lighting. And how do you learn this? It comes with practice, guys. To this day, I will look at a face and say, well, I think it's going to be this, but wait a second, putting them in that light, something's telling me that doesn't work for them. Trust your gut, turn the face, turn the light, or both, and then life is good. And again, turning the face a little bit off to the side, shooting them on the broad side of the face, and that looks really cool. So a couple more examples there. Again, my wife, Melissa, split lighting on the broad side, she gets away with it. And then sometimes I can just chop into the light as well with shadow, and it looks very moody and dramatic. Sweet face, masculine light, sour light, sweet and sour, no problem. Still tastes good, so to speak. What about, this is now getting a little bit tricky now. We're going to be doing another lighting pattern, profile, short, open loop. So illuminating a small part of the face. It's dramatic, moody, and cinematic. So we've got that loop shadow. It's open loop. So we've got an open light between there and there, but I'm shooting the profile. This can look really cool, very dramatic. And of course, you get the right subject, the right expression, it can look really, really, really amazing. So I love this kind of stuff. You might say, well, how do I do this? Well, all you've got to do, guys, is wherever your light source is, just turn them right away from the light source, and then simply just, like you're standing here, you just turn the light, turn the face towards the light, or the light away from the face, depending on which way you're doing it, And as soon as that light tickles this eye, you know there's going to be a strong shadow on this side of the face. And it can work really, really beautifully. I love this kind of lighting. You may see this actually on both photographs that are flanking me. So if you look at this photograph and that photograph, you're actually seeing that exact kind of lighting setup, where we're turning the face into the light until this eye socket is completely lit. I do not see the other side of the face. I'm shooting a profile. This particular photograph, I've got light hitting her, but also hitting a reflector back on her, and that's the way you get that beautiful detail there as well. Now, you probably would have heard about clamshell lighting. Clamshell, what is a clamshell? Right, it's a shell. The sea opens up like this, or it can open up like that in photography terms. It's basically one light here and one light there. What is the golden rule when you're photographing clamshell? Before we discuss that, of course, it illuminates both sides of the face evenly. It's flat, less descriptive, it's very flattering. Now, when I say evenly, here's the thing. Of course, you see two ice lights here. We've got one light on top, one light on the bottom. It's flooding her. So, for example, if we liken light to water in this particular discussion here as well, we've got light coming on her this way, but it might not wet her, so to speak, on different parts of the face. So where it's not wetting her, it's going to wet her here, as in where it's not illuminating her on this side, it's illuminating her on that side. So we get this sort of beautiful, even look. It's really, really important, guys, to know that when you're doing clamshell lighting, the value of your light sources and the intensity of the light between both either have to be the same, if not this one be a little bit brighter. If this one is brighter, as in this one becomes your main light and this one becomes your fill, well, then you're going to get some ugly shadows on the upper cheekbones, and that's not cool, especially for the female form. When she's not going to like that. So one light on top, one light on the bottom, and it could be anything. It could be two flashes, it could be two reflectors, it could be whatever you're doing. Just don't have that bottom light less of value, less intensity than the other one. And of course, that's the shot that we get. This one was actually done, two photographs actually, in fact, this was but basically this is her in real life. That's the reflection. I did one looking at the camera, one looking down, and then I flipped it, and that's how we actually get that particular look. But you can see how it's very, very flattering, very, very beautiful. The light floods on her face, top and bottom, very evenly, and it works really well. One light that you probably haven't seen a lot of is called badger. If you actually Google the animal badger, it's quite weird. There's a bit of the pattern of fur and the different kind of contrast of fur on their faces. It's almost like a shadow. It's actually quite weird. An actual badger, the animal, has a shadow, basically, a marking on the fur here and here that's contrasty. So in some ways it's not actually linguistically correct, for want of a better word, but we often refer to badger or clamshell from behind, or double back it's been popularized over the last several years and decades. That's basically creating a shadow in the middle of the face. So we call this moody, dramatic and sinister. You would very, very rarely do this on someone, but you can sort of see, depending on what you're trying to say, that can be very, very effective. So just be careful and use that kind of lighting with caution. You can use double back in a sense where you don't create a shadow on the face, but you just get a little bit of an edge light, which we're going to talk about right now. So you may have heard of rim light, edge light, backlight, hair light. What does that basically mean? Well, they all pretty much mean the same thing, because I could separate them, but ultimately they're the same thing. Illuminates the subject from behind. That's pretty much it. Separates the subject from the background. It gives us depth, dimension. It's quite moody. So what am I basically alluding to here? Well, this little rim light, the edge light, that's actually separating her from the background. I'm not saying that was a must or that had to happen, but that gives us a bit of a sliver and it defines some shape. It looks really cool. This one here, of course, we've got the sunlight as the hair light, and of course we've got a flood of light coming in there as well, but we've got this beautiful light sort of tickling them on the edge. So this would be an edge light, this will be a hair light or a rim light. Again, don't be caught up on the verbiage, get caught up on what mood you're trying to create for the particular person that you're photographing for the desired result that you want. This one here was basically using off-camera flash. That was from behind. Of course, I've got quite a chaotic background, but I needed some light, and I've specifically placed them so that the blue sky is right there, and I needed a bit of a highlight to contrast with the background, and that works really well. This is one of the shots that was a homage to the movie Sin City. It's got a very film noir look. Of course, this is basically split lighting, and then we've got that little edge light as well on the side of the face, and it does give us that very beautiful film noir look that we've often seen popularised in movies to this very day. I mean, this is a very popular thing to do, and we'll see this all the time. This as well, we've got split lighting, and then we've got a bit of light from the side. Now you might say, Jerry, this isn't perfect lighting. What are you doing showing us this light for? This light from the side shouldn't be touching his nose. Well, guys, you have to remember that lighting is not just about flattery, it's also about what you're trying to say. I'm deliberately trying to make this light look a bit raw and sexy and not too perfect, because in real life, like if you watch movies, not every subject or not every actor or actress or whatever is going to be in complete perfect lighting, because lighting in everyday life is not perfect, so to speak. So we have to understand that. This one here, we've got light coming from the side. We've got open loop, as in we've got short lighting here, because his face is on a bit of an angle. But now we've got that little edge light that gives us a little bit of definition on his jawline in the back, and it separates him. How did we do this? This was a window on one side and a window on the other. He was close to the light source, therefore making the background darker, as we've mentioned in previous segments. And then we've got that little hint of highlight tickling his jaw. So it's amazing how we can use the environment to look like a studio. This one here, we've got the main light in the front, and then we've got that little bit of a hair light in the background, again separating her hair from the background. Not as important for her because she's got blonde hair, and then we've got a dark background, but again, depends on what you want. This one here, we've got backlight. That was using one flash, off-camera flash, and it's illuminating them from behind, bouncing between them. There's a little bit of ambience in the front, and of course it's giving us a bit of a rim, not so much a hair light in this case, but a little bit of a rim light, and then working that as well. So this could be really, really cool, a great way of working. This could be, for example, you could be in the middle of a park and you've got trees all around, a little shaft of light that's basically a break in the trees where light's coming through. You might position your couple right there. That's the hair light, backlight, rim light, edge light, whatever you want to call it. Then you actually create light from the front, or it could just be the existing ambient open shade that's coming right through. It depends on what you want. So let's now talk about edge light combined with front light. Now, I could show you many examples of this. I think this next photograph, I'm only showing you one. It just gives you an idea of what you see in Hollywood movies, what you see on Hollywood posters. It's been popularized, and in fact, almost every sports photograph that's in a studio would do this. So what we've got is we've got light from either side, and then we've got light from the front. So if I basically took away that light from either side, it would just be practical butterfly lighting, I guess, because it's slightly up above, it's illuminating it quite nicely, but the light from either side has to be brighter than the light from the front. Otherwise, you just wouldn't see the evidence of that light source. So that highlight from the back, that highlight from the back gives us a bit of contouring, beautiful light from the front, and as you can see, it actually is very, very beautiful and very flattering. What other kind of lighting do we have? Well, there's underlight, as I call it. Underlight, ghoul lighting, it's a ghoul, it's just devilish almost. It illuminates the face from underneath. Sinister, it's very unflattering. Would I ever photograph a girl under this circumstance? I don't think I ever have, or at least done it deliberately. Do I photograph guys like this? Well, let me show you a perfect example of light like this. This is basically using about 30 odd candles to illuminate these guys. It's very masculine. It's got a very much like a Godfather Mafia sort of style feel to it. Therefore, the lighting should not be flattering. It should just be what I'm trying to actually execute and trying to say about these guys. I do want to make this deliberately look dramatic, so therefore the light's coming from behind. This guy Finesse is a singer, a bit of a rapper, and I thought that light coming from below gives him that sort of larger-than-life sort of look. As you can see, we do have those unflattering shadows on the upper cheekbones, but he gets away with it because he's a cool guy, he's a tough guy. if you get the girl in that sort of look and feel, again, that's going to be a bit of an issue. Let's now talk about no light, because often we don't hear about a silhouette or no light being one of the lighting patterns, because it's almost like it's an oxymoron. Like a silhouette, there is zero light. It's not a lighting pattern. It's a no light pattern. Well, this can be very effective. There's no light on the subject, but on the background or from the background. So in this case, yes, there's a bit of detail in there in the foreground, but ultimately we've got the sunlight hitting a wall and there's no sun hitting them. So they're in the shade, the sunlight hitting the wall, and then I outline them like this. Great example on a wedding day. We've got the sun behind this little ridge. It hits the back of them. There's got a little hint of rim there as well, but there's pretty much next to no light on them at all. But this creates a beautiful, beautiful effect. It's important that when you're photographing a silhouette and a pose like this, that your pose is more pronounced to give you more emotion that the actual expression is not, because you can't see the expression. How about this one? Similar idea to before. We've got light on a wall, and then I bring these guys in shadow, and then I expose for the light from behind, as in I just get the value of light that I want on the wall, therefore making the actual couple almost pitch black. I love that little silhouette of that beautiful eyelash on the other side, and it gives us a great effect. This one here, we've got a translucent material on the front of this entryway, and what I'm basically doing is I'm getting this sort of the graduated sort of feel of the light through this translucent piece of glass, but I deliberately silhouette her and her body shape in amongst all of those, what would you call it, fence or whatever, or bars or whatever you call it. But again, it's important because we're not really seeing much expression, but we're getting the expression from the pose. So sometimes no light on the subject can just say as much about that subject as you would illuminate that particular person. In this case, we're photographing a Game of Thrones style of a wedding. This was basically photographed in a cellar, in a mansion of sorts, and there was a spotlight on the actual wall, and I got the exposure that I wanted for it, put them in the shadow in the foreground, therefore created a beautiful outline, and then captured the ambience around. So guys, I really hope I haven't confused you with all of that. You are going to see in the case studies of the weddings, the real weddings that I've actually included in this bundle, you will see all these examples of different lighting situations in there. There's going to be everything from that loop, that open loop, the split lighting, split front, broad, butterfly lighting, you name it. Remember, guys, it's not important that we remember the names and we try to sound really intelligent in front of other photographers. What you need to do is just understand what light source is going to achieve the desired result with that person, with that hair, with that skin type, in that situation, with this light source. That's the more important that you need to know. Once we do this, it becomes liberating to free yourself of how to create that kind of a look. What we want to do is have a complete lighting arsenal in our minds, in our gear, and we need to know how to execute it. So take your time, practice all these things, and remember, if you know nothing else, you hold the light to someone's face and you move it around until the light and shadow says what you want to say about that subject. So practice, practice, practice.